Good morning from Mission Control Center in Houston, Texas, in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, where teams on the ground are looking live, as you are now, on NASA Plus, as two NASA astronauts prepare to venture outside the International Space Station and begin a spacewalk to support International Space Station assembly, maintenance, and upgrades. Today's U.S. spacewalk is spacewalk number 91 on the docket, and that includes NASA astronaut and flight engineer Nick Hague, who you see in front of you with the red stripes on the pants, and commander of Expedition 72, the current expedition aboard the International Space Station, and Suni Williams. Nick Hague, dubbed EVA throughout today's broadcast. And again, he will be wearing those red stripes, as you see in that bottom left-hand corner to indicate. And for Suni Williams, the commander of Expedition 72, she will be wearing be dubbed EV2. The two astronauts are currently halfway through their pre-breathing techniques in preparation for today's spacewalk to prepare themselves and avoid decompression sickness by removing nitrogen from the bloodstream, and that avoids what they would call the bends or decompression sickness as they leave the high pressure system of the International Space Station into the vacuum of space. And now you can see Don Pettit, NASA astronaut, joining him for some final photos as the two crew members, Nick Hague on the right, Suni Williams on the left. They are still hooked up and again in that pre-breathe that they have been undergoing for about an hour now and still have a little ways to go before the go for decompression. They are currently in the Quest airlock of the International Space Station and the equipment lock where the two astronauts suited up some couple hours ago, went through leak checks, everything went A-OK. And now in those final few moments of preparations, pictures with their crewmates and expedition crew, and finishing up their pre-breathe before eventually venturing into the vacuum of space. Working with NASA astronaut Nick Hague and Suni Williams in preparation for today, their spacewalk support. They were assisted into their suits some time ago by Butch Wilmore for spacewalk support, as well as Don Pettit, who you saw in that field of view just a few moments ago, snapping a couple of extra photos, and they will be inside the space station monitoring from that vantage point, as well as teams here on the ground. And taking a look at the statistics going into today's spacewalk for Nick Hague, this will be his fourth spacewalk. Previously conducted his 3 for a total of 19 hours and 56 minutes. And for commander of Expedition 72, Suni Williams, this will be her 8th, as her previous 7 would have her go at 50 hours and 40 minutes. This is the 273rd spacewalk in support of International Space Station assembly, maintenance, and upgrades, and the first spacewalk of 2025, and the second for Expedition 72. After the pre-breathe, the two astronauts will be removed from their attachments on the walls there of the equipment lock inside the Quest airlock of the space station. Their safer units, or the simplified aid for EVA rescue needed in case of emergencies, will then be attached, and that's where Butch Wilmore and Don Pettit will come in and help them assist before eventually moving into the crew lock, which you see back behind you, where the two astronauts will venture in. The hatch will close, and then the decompression of that hatch to meet up with the pressure of the vacuum of space will then equalize before the crew can then egress and begin their day's journey. For the team here on the ground inside Mission Control Houston and the International Space Station Flight Control Room, they are led today by Flight Director Nicole McElroy, as the team on the ground currently undergoing a handover period, as Nicole will be the Spacewalk Flight Director for today's EVA. Her and her Vista flight team will also be joined alongside NASA astronaut Jessica Whitner, who will be the Spacewalk Communicator, and also joined alongside by Aki Hoshide for Capcom and all other communications inside the International Space Station. And this EVA team has been active this morning, again experiencing the handover period in which Nicole McElroy and her Vista flight team will take over and prepare the crew for the rest of their journey as their pre-breathe Continuing to roll on along for a little over an hour now. And during this pre-breathe technique, you'll see the astronauts moving around, moving their arms. They were going through regimented exercise routines earlier, just lifting their legs, and to accelerate the body's absorption of pure oxygen, and again, to get rid of and remove nitrogen from their system to avoid decompression sickness, similar to what divers go through when moving up from deep depths to the surface, where you move from a high pressure to a low pressure, similar to what's experienced here, the high pressure inside the International Space Station, and then eventually moving out to no pressure, the vacuum of space. For this U.S. EVA number 91, taking a look at the planned tasks that are on the docket for both Nick Hague and Suni Williams. The priority task that Nicole McElroy and team issued during a press briefing earlier in the week was to remove and replace the rate gyro assembly. That is number 2, and that is what measures the angular motion of the International Space Station about each of its 3 axes. There are 2 rate gyro assemblies on board just inside the main truss figure, and that was last installed back in September of 2009 during the shuttle era aboard STS-128 and International Space Station Assembly Mission number 17. So again, most of these tasks for removal and replace are R&R, as you may hear throughout the broadcast today, and that is for that maintenance and upgrades. The second task that will be focused on will be to remove and replace the Harmony Zenith or space-facing planar reflector that is close to the port for visiting vehicles. And that planar reflector is a part of the docking procedures for visiting vehicles that come and go from the International Space Station. Currently, the Crew 9 SpaceX Dragon is attached to this location, and this is where they will be removing and replacing that reflector, which sends signals to and from visiting vehicles as they are on approach to the International Space Station. Also, during this time frame, we will see one of the astronauts install a Neutron, or install patches for the nicer payload, the Neutron Star Interior Composition Explorer patches, and that is an X-ray telescope that studies neutron stars, black holes, and other phenomena. This telescope has thermal shields over their detectors to prevent sunlight from interfering with the X-ray measurements. However, over time, they have been damaged, and that has allowed sunlight to leak into the instrument during daylight hours. So during this EVA, they will have installing wedge-shaped patches that you will see throughout, and we will update you throughout the course of the broadcast on that progress to help patch up those areas to remove unwanted sunlight from entering that experiment and that X-ray telescope, and to allow it to resume during daylight operations. And the final task for today's EVA is to prepare the alpha magnetic spectrometer patch panel for upgrades, and this will be a part of a sequence of tasks to upgrade that overall panel and overall experiment moving forward. And for them, that'll be a one step of many in the coming future, but that will be the final task that the 2 astronauts will focus in on. This is Mission Control Houston, where we are continuing to follow along the coverage and preparation for U.S. EVA number 91, featuring NASA astronauts and Commander of Expedition 72, Suni Williams, and Nick Hague. We just completed a handover period here inside of Mission Control in the ISS Flight Control Room as Flight Director Nicole McElroy and her Vista flight team settled in for preparation. Now, as we look back on board and what's happening inside the International Space Station, we talked earlier in the broadcast about how support teams and Butch Wilmore in Navy, in the Navy shirt on the left, and Don Pettit, the short-sleeved Navy shirt on the right-hand side, will be supporting both Suni Williams and Nick Hague throughout today's spacewalk as they attach what is known as the SAFER units right now. And this SAFER unit, or the Simplified Aid for EVA Response, is a safety mechanism should these astronauts ever be untethered from the International Space Station. They provide stability, thrust, and maneuverability to allow them to get back to a station. So that is what they are currently attaching to what looks to be Nick Hague's uniform, and we know that it'll be Nick Hague based on the red stripes that his suit will be wearing throughout today's spacewalk. And you can get a glimpse of those red stripes a little bit on the pants there towards the bottom of your screen. And Suni Williams will await her turn here in just a couple of moments. You are looking live just outside of the Quest airlock on board the International Space Station as you're starting to see movement of the hatch opening as NASA astronauts Nick Hague and Suni Williams, now 7.5 minutes into today's EVA, will open things up as you see there and get ready to traverse out into the vacuum of space.
The airlock. You're going to be attaching your anchor hook to forward and Suni's to aft. All right, that's good checks, both crew. We can start our translation now. So, Nick, you're going to lead and head out to the S0 port wedge face. Let me know if you want some mile markers along the way. And then, Suni, you're going to follow to the starboard Cedar cart.
We are approaching 19 minutes into today's EVA activities as NASA astronauts Nick Hague and Suni Williams continue to communicate as they make their way over to the first task of the EVA, which is to remove and replace the rate gyro assembly unit number 2 that has been given the command to be powered down in anticipation of this remove and replace. Now 30 minutes into today's EVA activities as you are seeing Expedition 72 Commander and NASA astronaut Suni Williams continuing to work on the portable foot restraint just outside the truss system of the International Space Station.
Yes, Suni, we're thinking through it down here as well.
Williams in constant communication to troubleshoot with the team here on the ground with NASA astronaut and spaceflight communicator Jessica Whitner. 37 minutes into today's EVA with the great side-by-side view of NASA astronauts Nick Hague on the left and Suni Williams on the right in their helmet cams as they work on today's first task, the removal and replacement of the rate gyro assembly number 2, which helps calculate rotational rate data and the rate of change of the orientation of the International Space Station and helps better calculate that orientation. This rate gyro assembly number 2 originally installed back in September of 2009 as a part of STS-128 and Space Station Assembly Mission number 17. And this is a view from Suni Williams' helmet cam. She is inside the truss system and will await the arrival of that new unit. And there you can see Nick Hague just across her field of view as they now begin to move the new rate gyro assembly unit into place.
Suni, we're going to drive the bolts to hard stop 9.5 to 13 turns. All right, with that, guys, the RGA install is complete, so we're moving over to cleanup now. Suni, you can egress the truss and check your safer handles down, and then you're going to go retrieve your crew lock bag from the starboard Cedar cart.
Just over an hour and 4 minutes into today's EVA, and there you see a great view of NASA astronaut and commander of Expedition 72, Suni Williams, making her way away from the S0 truss, which the rate gyro assembly number 2 had just been completed with the remove and replace of the old unit to a new one that has just been approved to be powered on. And then also in that field of view, you see the SpaceX Dragon for Crew 9 off into the distance, as both Suni Williams and Nick Hague will stow the old rate gyro assembly unit here shortly before continuing on with today's planned tasks. And those tasks will include the removal and replacement of a Harmony Zenith planar reflector, which is actually close to that Dragon spacecraft, as well as the installation of a neutron star interior composition explorer patch, or the NICER X-ray telescope experiment, and prepare the alpha magnetic spectrometer patch panel for future upgrades. Wonderful views from the helmet cam of NASA astronaut Nick Hague as they are translating from the S0 truss on the International Space Station about the midway point, the backbone of the International Space Station, and you can see the curvature of the Earth below him. And there is the Quest airlock right in front of him as he moves to go and stow the replaced rate gyro assembly number 2. This is Mission Control Houston as we continue to bring you live coverage and updates from today's U.S. EVA number 91. Currently being operated by NASA astronaut and commander of Expedition 72, Suni Williams, who you see in your field of view here. Suni is now preparing for the removal and replacement of a planar reflector used in communications for visiting vehicles to help them measure the rate of closure and distance as they approach the International Space Station. You also just heard communication between the ground teams here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room and Nick Hague, who you now see here translating or moving across the truss system of the International Space Station in preparation for his next task, as he and Suni Williams will be working simultaneously on different tasks. For Nick Hague, he will be working to patch the nicer payload and install patches of that nicer payload. And that is an X-ray telescope experiment that studies neutron stars, black holes, and other phenomena. Unfortunately, due to just time and degradation, that has allowed sunlight to interfere with the X-ray measurements during the daylight time as the International Space Station orbits around the Earth. So these patches that Nick Hague will be providing will help reduce that light pollution coming from the sun, and that it can return back to near full strength during daylight hours.
Stay on TMA, you can move around and take photos.
And a great view from the helmet camera of NASA astronaut Nick Hague as he continues to prepare for his second task of today's EVA. And you can see floating off just past that left hand of his, those are the wedge-shaped NICER patches that he'll be inserting into the NICER experiment, the X-ray telescope that helps study neutron stars, black holes, and other phenomena. And he will take those wedges and place them strategically in certain spots on the NICER to help reduce unwanted sunlight from penetrating the X-ray telescope.
No, totally understand.
A great view of astronaut Suni Williams as she continues to prepare for the removal and replacement of the planar reflector just outside of the zenith port of the Harmony module. That is the space-facing port that is currently occupied by a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft that brought Crew 9 aboard the International Space Station. That occurred back in late September, but the planar reflector is right there just a few bits of distance away from that spacecraft, in which Suni Williams will release 3 different bolts and actually replace the actual reflective portion of it all that both the Dragon and other visiting vehicles use on approach and docking to the International Space Station. And again, another great view from the camera on the helmet of NASA astronaut Nick Hague as he begins the patching of certain pie-shaped wedges on the NICER experiment, the X-ray telescope that helps measure neutron stars, black holes, and other phenomena that have been damaged over time and allowing unwanted sunlight to enter and throw off the X-ray measurements. And you see those pie-shaped wedges throughout the experiment from his view, and those are where he will insert those patches from a caddy that he has attached to his spacesuit. And a good view of the tool he is using and inserting a patch in strategic locations throughout the X-ray telescope. This is Mission Control Houston as we continue to follow along with today's coverage of US EVA 91, and you are seeing the view from the helmet camera and now an exterior camera on the International Space Station as Commander of Expedition 72 Suni Williams is attaching the replacement of the planar reflector just outside of the zenith port of the Harmony module. And that helmet camera of Williams right now, she's tightening up the bolts, the 3 bolts that will secure the new planar reflector to its attachment just outside the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft, the Crew 9 spacecraft. And there you see a fantastic view of the upcoming orbital sunrise that will soon make its way over top of the International Space Station.
We were just taking a look at your HECA view. We're just taking a look at your HECA view, Nick, and it looks like the C2V2 cables look good to us, so we can move on to some AMS setup. You're going to go back and retrieve crew lock bag from that handrail, and then we'll get you translating to the AMS support worksite.
Okay, work. Okay, 6-inch Bravo is on my PGT test.
Great communications there between NASA astronauts Suni Williams and Nick Hague out on US EVA Walk 91 in relay with communications to the ground crew here at the International Space Station Flight Control Room as Suni has completed the install of the planar reflector on the zenith, excuse me, close to the zenith port of the Harmony module.
Okay,
And
copy. We can actually see
now
them as
wrapping
well
up
in
her
our back of you.
workspace, whereas
Can
for
you give us
NASA astronaut Nick
approximate
Hague,
size and,
recently just completed
so we
the
can kind of see the location?
readjustment of a C2 V2 cable that will allow for the alpha magnetic spectrometer to have easier access for both he and Suni Williams here in just a few moments as a part of their planned EVA tasks for the day. Just a little over 2 hours and 53 minutes into today's planned spacewalk. That has now included the successful removal and replacement of the planar reflector as mentioned on the International Space Station docking adapter Harmony module, the replacement of the rate gyro assembly number 2, and patches for the damaged NICER X-ray telescope experiment. This is Mission Control Houston, where you are watching live coverage of US EVA 91 featuring NASA astronauts Nick Hague and Suni Williams, as we have just crossed over the 3-hour and 5-minute mark of their planned tasks for today. You heard communications between the two astronauts and the ground teams here inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room with Flight Director Nicole McElroy and Spacewalk Communicator Jessica Whitner, and also communications from Farouk Sabur, the Spacewalk lead officer, and giving updates on the timeline and tasks as they are approximately 15 minutes or so ahead of schedule. But right now, both of them preparing after recent activities completing the replacement of the rate gyro assembly number 2, the removal and replacement of a planar reflector just outside the Zenith Harmony module, the space-facing module, or port, pardon me, of the International Docking Adapter, the patches for the damaged NICER experiment, and then Nick Hague just recently completed the replacement of a C2 V2 cable, a common communications for visiting vehicles communication line to help set up for the visuals of the alpha magnetic spectrometer setup. And that is what Nick Hague is doing now, and Suni Williams will be joining him shortly. Now, this will be tasks that will preview and ultimately set up future EVAs for the ultimate upgrade that will consist of additional radiators for the alpha magnetic spectrometer to dissipate heat, as well as a silicon tracker layer that will significantly increase the data acceptance and what the spectrometer can receive on the data side. So these will be preparatory tasks of that spectrometer setup, and no current upgrades for both Williams and Hague on this current task. You're looking at a live view inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room for continued coverage of US EVA 91, featuring NASA astronauts Suni Williams and Nick Hague as they continue to work down their checklist of tasks that have already had quite a bit checked off, including the replacement of the rate gyro assembly number 2, the removal and replacement of a planar reflector for communications for visiting vehicles, patches to a damaged portions of the NICER X-ray telescope, and now preparing for preparatory tasks for future EVAs on the alpha magnetic spectrometer and upgrades in those future EVAs for that AMS. And this is all a part of the 273rd spacewalk in support of International Space Station assembly, maintenance, and upgrades. And of that maintenance, looking back at the alpha magnetic spectrometer, that was launched back on May 16th, 2011, the penultimate or second to last space shuttle launch, in which Shuttle Endeavour would carry that up to the International Space Station on STS-134. Great views from the helmet cams of NASA astronaut Nick Hague on the left, EV1, and NASA astronaut Suni Williams, EV2. As together they continue to work to loosen the ties around the beta cloth covering a panel on the alpha magnetic spectrometer. And once inside, they will take a look at the spectrometer and survey for potential future EVA plannings for upgrades that'll see additional radiators installed for dispersion of heat, as well as increasing its ability to receive data from its experiments. Now 3 hours and 41 minutes into today's EVA, and everything so far has gone expected, even so much so as having the team of Hague and Williams get a little bit ahead of schedule, and that includes replacing the rate gyro assembly number 2, the removal and replacing of a planar reflector to help with visiting vehicle communications when they approach and dock with the International Space Station, patching the damaged NICER experiment, an X-ray telescope on the International Space Station that was seeing unwanted light enter the experiment, and those patches have been completed, and now both Williams and Hague working together on the alpha magnetic spectrometer. NASA astronauts Nick Hague and Suni Williams continue to work diligently on a patch panel connected to the alpha magnetic spectrometer as a part of today's US EVA 91 tasks as they look to free up ties. They just moved out of the way a beta cloth to allow access to this patch panel just a few moments ago. Now 3 hours and 52 minutes into today's EVA, and all tasks for both Hague and Williams have gone right on schedule. In fact, so much so they are a little bit ahead of schedule, but continuing to work on this patch panel and look at the alpha magnetic spectrometer and do preparatory tasks in preparation for future work. And that includes pulling back the beta cloth as mentioned, and then we'll be testing access to various connectors within the alpha magnetic spectrometer, and that'll inform future upgrades that allow for both more data and higher accuracy measurements, as well as greater dispersion of heat as exposed to sunlight. The International Space Station is currently wrapping up a time period of orbital nighttime. They'll be entering daytime here in the next few moments as both Nick Hague and Suni Williams continue to diligently work together and showcase teamwork on this task for the AMS. You are tuned in live on NASA Plus to the ongoing progression of US EVA number 91, featuring NASA astronauts Suni Williams and Nick Hague as they continue to progress through their checklist. We are now 4 hours and 26 minutes into today's EVA that has seen them replace the rate gyro assembly number 2, remove and replace a planar reflector for communications for visiting vehicles outside the zenith port of the Harmony module, the space-facing port. Also installing patches for the damaged NICER experiment, the X-ray telescope that was allowing unwanted sunlight into its sensitive instrumentations inside. So those patches have since been complete, and now both Williams and Hague working together to take a look at the alpha magnetic spectrometer and the work site, taking diligent notes of body positionings, tool configurations, and more surrounding a patch panel for future upgrades on future EVAs. They continue to work as diligent and have been working as a team all throughout the day, or in teamwork all throughout the day. For Nick Hague, his 4th spacewalk. For Suni Williams, this is her 8th spacewalk in support of International Space Station assembly, maintenance, and upgrades.
I'll get from this angle.
Great communications between the teams on the ground here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, up to NASA astronauts Suni Williams and Nick Hague as they continue to progress along their EVA today, US EVA number 91, in which they are approaching 4 hours and 39 minutes into this EVA. You heard spacewalk communicator Jessica Whitner, NASA astronaut, relay up to the crew that they are about an hour ahead of schedule. So they have additional tasks that are available for the astronauts to perform, one being additional photography and work around the alpha magnetic spectrometer, which is the task they are currently working on at the moment, in which they were looking at patch panels and beta cloths, removing ties, and essentially looking over the job site and taking inventory of what can be done for future upgrades of the alpha magnetic spectrometer. But the team also relayed information about taking additional photography of MMOD, or a micrometeoroid debris strike, that has no effect on the performance of the alpha magnetic spectrometer or any areas of the International Space Station, but they had noted that in the journey of the astronauts today, crossing paths over the International Space Station, and would like additional photography, and then also for them to both address the APFR, or the articulating portable foot restraint that was addressed earlier today by NASA astronaut Suni Williams, as they had a couple of pieces on that APFR, again, the articulating portable foot restraint, that were stuck and unusable at the time before moving on to future tasks. So again, approaching 4 hours and just over 40 minutes now of today's EVA with NASA astronaut Suni Williams and Nick Hague as they wrap up and start to add on or wrap up their tasks at the alpha magnetic spectrometer and move on to potentially additional tasks assigned by the teams here inside Mission Control. And you just heard their communication from spacewalk communicator Jessica Whitner relaying up the next steps for this EVA, USA EVA 91, as they complete their tasks at the alpha magnetic spectrometer. And now they will together return to the airlock to drop off some tools and equipment before together making their way to the APFR, the articulating portable foot restraint that had a couple components stuck earlier today at the beginning of the EVA, but did not play a role or a factor in the removal and replacement of the rate gyro assembly. So this will be a get-ahead task for the two crew members that are participating now, what is going to be 4 minutes and 54 seconds into the EVA, the fourth in the career of NASA astronaut Nick Hague and the eighth for Suni Williams. They have just entered an orbital nighttime period as the International Space Station currently flying over Europe and the southern border of Poland. You heard good words there from spacewalk communicator Jessica Whitner relaying up to the crew of Nick Hague and Suni Williams out on US EVA number 91 of additional tasks assigned to the two of them as they translate across the International Space Station, as they have gotten ahead of their time frame, still about 45 minutes or so ahead of their scheduled tasks, which included 4 key ones that they have since completed, as they are now 5 hours and 14 minutes into their scheduled EVA. So with that extra time on their schedule, able to stop by the airlock and stow bags and continued cleanup before wrapping up today's EVA. But they will also take some imagery of an ammonia line for additional engineering and research purposes. That will be coming up here shortly. And then another articulating portable foot restraint will be reviewed here shortly along those lines as well. So that is what the additional tasks have been relayed up to both Nick Hague and Suni Williams towards the back end of this EVA and spacewalk today. Continuing our live coverage of today's US EVA number 91, as you heard from the ground and spacewalk communicator Jessica Whitner, that the additional tasks assigned for NASA astronaut Nick Hague and Suni Williams have been completed. For Suni, taking imagery or photos of an ammonia line, and for Nick Hague to evaluate an articulating portable foot restraint aboard the International Space Station. Approaching now 5 hours and 42 minutes of EVA time that got underway at 7:01 a.m. Central Time, 8:01 a.m. Eastern. The team has been working efficiently and cruising right through their assigned tasks. They had 4 major ones for today, including the replacing of a rate gyro assembly as the top task, removing and replacing a planar reflector for communications for visiting vehicles, patching up a damaged portion of the NICER X-ray telescope to allow for that to be fully operational once again, and then assessing the work site and potential for future upgrades to the alpha magnetic spectrometer. And as mentioned, the additional tasks they were able to squeeze in because of their efficiency throughout the day today were to take imagery of that ammonia line on the Unity module and evaluate an articulating portable foot restraint. Now you see the imagery right there of astronaut Nick Hague. He's the one with the red stripes on his uniform. You can see that illustrated on the legs of his spacesuit. This view from Suni Williams is the two standing just outside the Quest airlock and looking to begin their journey back inside the orbiting laboratory. And there you can see the team that has been working with the two astronauts every step of the way today, led by Spacewalk Flight Director Nicole McElroy there in the middle of your screen, Flight Director Elias Mirmo, who will be directing the next U.S. spacewalk that'll be occurring a week from today, there for support. Jessica Whitner just down that middle row. She's acting as the spacewalk communicator, relaying all instructions up to the crew outside the International Space Station. and Aki Hoshide of JAXA as the COTCOM for everyone inside of the space station. And just behind in that back row, you see Farouk Sabur in the back row to the right, the spacewalk lead officer today that's been helping orchestrate a lot of these tasks and seeing what's available for get-ahead opportunities for the two astronauts. And there you heard the communication from Jessica Whitner, the spacewalk communicator, up to the crew as they have now begun the ingress process, or returning inside the International Space Station after a hard day's work out and about the orbiting laboratory in the vacuum of space, completing the 4 key tasks and an additional 2 tasks on today's spacewalk. Now approaching 5 hours and 49 minutes of EVA time as, again, the crew aboard the International Space Station, both Williams and Hague in their suits, but their support team of Butch Wilmore and Don Pettit will be awaiting for them. And there they are right there looking through the hatchway. They are in the equipment lock of the Quest airlock portion, and they're looking through the window at both Hague and Williams as they make their way back inside the International Space Station.
Me? Yep, I heard you. Okay. Jess, we're both in SCU.
Okay, copy. Nick, Sunny. With that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off here and hand you back to Butch. But before I do that, I just want to take a quick moment to congratulate both you and the entire team today on a safe and really highly successful EVA. Some of these tasks we accomplished today were really a long time in the making, so it really was the combined efforts of both the team on orbit and the many, many teams on the ground that made today a reality. So I just want to say thank you all for dedicating the time and the effort that you did. And congrats, Nick and Sunny, on the completion of your 4th and 8th EVAs, respectively. Job well done.
Thanks, Jeff. You did an awesome job today. And, you know, those are great words. As you mentioned those teams, it flashes through my head seeing the faces and the smiles of all those people support us at the MBL and the VR lab and Building 9, and the team that makes this happen is it's just really special to be a part of it and get to do this with them. We're about 2 months short of the 60th anniversary of the first spacewalk, and it's just really cool to be part of that legacy and do our little bit.
In a couple of words, also, if you don't mind, Nick.
Fire away.
You know, it's a huge team, but also our families. Thank you to them. Mr. This, Mother Sister, particularly on the 60th anniversary of spacewalking. Happy birthday to my husband, Mike.
Hey, happy birthday, Mike.
And you just heard from the crew aboard the International Space Station and NASA astronauts Nick Hague and Suni Williams as they are returned to the crew lock with some joyous words of their day today, and truly a team effort from those up aboard the International Space Station and those teams here on the ground. We continue our live coverage of U.S. Spacewalk 91 as NASA astronauts Suni Williams and Nick Hague have returned inside the crew lock after an exactly 6-hour spacewalk today that saw them accomplish a multitude of tasks. And as we update the numbers with that time frame, today the 273rd spacewalk in support of space station assembly, maintenance, and upgrades. As we hear Butch Wilmore and the internal team inside the International Space Station continuing to monitor the repressurization of the crew lock to bring both Hague and Williams back inside. Today's spacewalk for those two was the first out of station this year and the second spacewalk during Expedition 72. It is the 4th spacewalk of Nick Hague's career, and his new totals now are 25 hours and 56 minutes. The 8th spacewalk of Suni Williams' career, totaling now 56 hours and 40 minutes. And as mentioned, today's spacewalk lasted exactly 6 hours on the button, starting right at 7:01 a.m. Central Time and ending at 1:01 p.m. Central Time. And with that, in total, today, as we mentioned, the 273rd spacewalk in support of assembly, maintenance, and upgrades, and the total time of that approaching 1,729 hours, 13 minutes, or the equivalent of, at the bottom there, 72 days, 1 hour, and 13 minutes of spacewalking time for the International Space Station. And there you see the beautiful views of the hatch opening. Don Pettit and Butch Wilmore ready to welcome back inside the equipment lock Nick Hague and Suni Williams with some happy hugs as they make their way back inside the orbiting laboratory. That is Commander of Expedition 72, Suni Williams, entering in first. And there you see the top of her helmet. And then just past that, you see the feet up above the top of that crew lock belonging to astronaut Nick Hague.
We're still seeing no pain.
This is Mission Control Houston. As you can see from inside the Quest airlock, the helmets and gloves have been removed from NASA astronauts Suni Williams and Nick Hague after completing a 6-hour spacewalk, U.S. Spacewalk 91, completing a multitude of tasks in support of the International Space Station assembly, maintenance, and upgrades. That'll conclude our coverage for today's EVA, but taking a look ahead at what's to come for future EVAs, the next one, U.S. Spacewalk EVA 92, will be a week from now, Thursday, January 23rd, and starting at 6:45 a.m. Eastern Time, that'll be 5:45 a.m. Central Time. And again, that'll do it for our coverage today. Thank you so much for tuning in and staying with us for this 6-hour EVA, a successful one and a good day to go for a walk outside for NASA astronauts Suni Williams and Nick Hague. And you can follow along with all the latest updates on nasa.gov. This is Mission Control Houston.